How's it going, everybody? RazingHel here, and today we're going to be playing the fourth mission in the fourth mini-campaign for Stronghold Crusader HD called the County of Tripoli.
Now that the Truth Brothers have been dealt with, attention can be focused on bringing the Snake to justice. Duke Volpa has taken Duke Beauregard under his wing, giving him control of Castellum Bocci in the County of Tripoli.
The Lord of Lacum has requested aid. He has found himself fighting a war on two fronts, with the Snake on one side and the Wolf on the other. If Lacum can be secured, it will prove an ideal location from which to finish the Snake for good.
Okay, so we're going to be getting started here. This has overall been a rather interesting mission to play. So originally I was playing it, recording it through, because this is one of the problems with real-time strategy games for me, is it's difficult to play them and really focus on what you're doing, as well as provide any sort of meaningful commentary. So I tend to do these more involved ones, or the longer episodes. I try to dub them in post to talk a little bit about what's going on. So anyway, I had this one recorded up until about probably 5 minutes of victory, and then I accidentally somehow managed to grab my task manager, which is on my left monitor. I drag it into the screen of the game. Obviously, Crusader is like a really old application, so it didn't play too well with that, and it ended up crashing. So I lost my recording, I lost my game, and I had to start all over again. And so I went ahead and I played it again. Thankfully, this time I was able to improve a little bit on it, but I was I was really steamed about the entire incident, because it's just one of those things that really ends up taking up a lot of time for no good reason, basically. Yeah, so getting started here with the economy, obviously. Put down a couple of apple farms to hold us over until we actually get the wheat production up and going. I put down 4 wheat farms, 2 hop farms. Hop farms is one of those things I have a little bit of a difficult time balancing properly. You don't really need that many to support a fairly large population, but I always seem to err on the side of too much. Which is not a bad thing if you have the available oasis. I mean, I can always sell it. It's one of those things I could probably be more efficient about. So then what we're going to be doing here is just digging a little moat around my castle. Obviously, that is one of the AI's weak spots is when it comes to moats, and it's one of those quandaries that I've had, is how exactly do you go about deciding what aspects of the game are just unfair? Like, what can I take advantage of? Am I allowed to dig moats? Am I allowed to use fire ballistas? Stuff like that. And then it's like, okay, so if I don't, what's going to end up happening is then the match simply drags on longer than it would otherwise. I don't feel the best about it. I don't feel best about the rushing tactics, the fire ballista tactics, the moat tactics. But at the end of the day, right? It gets the job done in a relatively reasonable amount of time. Like, we don't want these missions to drag on too long. So what I generally do with a lot of missions, and I know this is something that really can't be carried over to the multiplayer arena, but certainly in skirmish you can do this, is just slow the game down a little bit at the very start, so that way you can get a pretty solid econ going from the very beginning. And just as a disclaimer, I'm not that knowledgeable about Stronghold Crusader and how the economy works. I would say I'm a fairly average player. There are definitely a lot of players who are better than me, as I was sort of schooled on back when Stronghold Crusader 2 came out. I probably had a 5-to-1 win ratio? No, 5 to... Oh, I forget. I'm terrible at ratios. I was losing basically 5 matches to every one that I won. So, compared to a lot of the other enthusiast Stronghold Crusader players, definitely not the best. I'd say my weakest game comes from attacking. Like, I'm not good at actually sieging. It's something I'm working at getting better on. I think I'm fairly decent at economy here. Like, I'm not really holding back at all. I'm pretty much doing something all the time, and that's one of the reasons why I'm not going to be able to commentate over some of these. But when it comes to actual sieging, it's it's a bit hit and miss. I think the campaigns themselves oftentimes set the player up a little bit to fail. Like the strategies that they use are ultimately not the best. They generally give you very few troops in a siege, and then they expect you to take a castle with it, and you have to be very mindful of the troops that you lose to be successful. And that just doesn't transfer over very well to a standard skirmish if you're actually going to be playing against the AI and you have pretty much an unlimited number of troops at your disposal. So I tended to play too cautiously because that's the way the game sort of trained me. I was always a big user of the single player. I'm a big single player, right? So I was never playing in the multiplayer arenas, I guess you could say, against other players. So I didn't learn a lot of the PvP strategies. I know some of them, but yeah, in general, I'm just better at playing against the AI. So that's one of those things you have to think about. Don't think that this can carry over player versus player, because I suck at that. What am I doing here? Well, the moat is going along quite well. Starting the bread economy there, obviously. There are different ways you can put down bakeries. The way I did it is not nearly as compact as it could be, but we have plenty of space here, so I really didn't feel the need to just to really optimize the amount of space. Like, you can do blocks, you can do rows or columns, however you want to look at it, or however you want to present it. But what I did is I provided one space between each building, which is not necessary, but it makes sure that everything's flowing along nicely in the economy, and the workers can find their shortest route to their job. So that way they're not walking around buildings, because that might be something you don't think about. It's like you set up a long line of buildings, and then all of a sudden bakers have to walk around that, and that's actually taking more time. So are you saving that much by actually clustering them? I think a lot of times you are, but sometimes you might not be. So then getting the brewers up and going to make some ale. What is really interesting here is how much oasis I actually had access to once I got rid of the trees. So in this episode, I was really able to build a pretty massive economy. Massive is a relative term, isn't it? Because what's massive to me is like, what do I usually build? I probably hit 100. So if I hit 140 in this one, I consider that massive. But there are plenty of players who hit higher than that, I believe. So then there's always this feeling of general inadequacy. Like, do I have any right to talk about what I'm talking about? And generally, who does? At the end of the day, there are very few people who are 100% qualified to speak about what it is they're talking about. So you would have a lot less going on if only the most, because, you know, even like professional sources get things wrong from time to time. Like professional journalists get stories wrong from time to time. And so you think about it, it's like, are we really going to set our standards that high when it comes to video gaming? Is this really that critical? It's not like we're trying to put people on another planet, you know? It's not like anybody's going to die if I mention or advocate for a strategy that is suboptimal, right? That's why in general, I think I have every right to talk about how I play the game, because, you know, at the end of it, I did win. So it might not be the best, but it gets the job done, and that's important too. So got our armories up, and now we're going to start working on crossbow production. So you're going to need a couple of tanners, and they're really close to the cow farm, the dairy farm in this instance. So I wasn't quite anticipating how productive they would be. They almost outstripped the Fletchers themselves 2-1. It was almost rather ridiculous. I didn't expect them to be that efficient, but they really were. And yeah, then we get some Fletchers up and building some crossbows. And the reason we need crossbows is because the wolf will attack with pikemen and sometimes some swordsmen. Bigger fan of the pikemen, which is interesting too, because if the AI focused more on pikemen, they certainly could dig up the moats that I put around this castle, right? If a player saw the moat that I had here, there would be no issue whatsoever getting past it. But the AI, they've never seemed to really be able to scale towards that. We've talked about moats in the past, and apparently how Firefly dropped them because they just couldn't make them work anymore. Or it was always going to be a weak spot for the AI. The advisor somehow was talking about stoning him. I have no idea what that's about, but nothing ever really came of it. You know, like there wasn't one huge invasion event that played. Generally what happened was the AI would attack as they normally would. See? So the snake right there, he's attacking. It's not a special attack, right? It's not a scripted event. It's just your average snake attack. And they give you plenty of leeway here, for sure. Another interesting thing I noticed about this mission is, for some reason, I was allowed to build a lot of buildings relatively close to enemy units, like a lot closer than I think I normally could. So I'm not exactly sure what is up with that. I just noticed that in this episode, it might have been in past episodes as well, but I kind of doubt it because, like, during invasions, I don't think I was able to build. Or is it because they're industry buildings? Yeah, that's why. That's rather interesting, right? Because I sometimes forget about this. You can actually build things like woodcutters' huts next to enemy units. That's the reason you can pull that trick where you put a woodcutter hut in front of the enemy AI castle gate, and then it will make them destroy their economy because of it. So that is an option. That would explain why I could place the buildings that I was trying to place relatively close to enemy units, is because it was an industry building. I think it was the iron mines. So the wolf is interested in attacking me. The resources such as stone and iron are relatively highly contested. There is no safe way to really quarry it or mine it. So I ended up having to stick this tower here to sort of defend my quarries, because the AI, one thing the AI is good at is just the constant micro harassment of your economy. They can make it where you just will give up on that part of your economy because it no longer is efficient to continue to replace the buildings that they destroy. So that's another area that I'd try to be a little bit more aggressive in now. Like when I was playing it by myself, like before I actually saw other people play the game, I would generally be a lot more conservative about what I allow to be outside my castle. Like I would want everything protected by walls or a moat, and I think I'm a little bit more open to letting some of those peasants outside now and actually roam around. So we're making crossbows. We got our towers up. It's nice to have a combination of crossbows and archers in your towers, because otherwise the AI is able to do that perfect little sniping thing where they're just out of range of your crossbowmen, but they can still fire at them. This has happened to me several times. It's really, really a bummer that they can do that, but when you have tons of units, it really doesn't matter as much. It's still just annoying to see it. So if you have archers in there, you cover the long range, and then the crossbowmen can cover the more immediate ranges with units such as, armored units such as pikemen and swordsmen. So the plan going forward on this is, obviously we have the bread economy going. So we're getting popularity from, double rations, getting popularity from having inns. So we're covering the entirety of our population with, right there we're putting up the iron mines. As you can see, I could put that building down right next to enemy units, and it's because it's one of those buildings that the game sort of understands you're going to be putting it outside of your castle range, really, and it just allows you to do that. But there will be other buildings that you can't do that with. So that's how you ended up with the gatehouse exploit. So there's the wolf. He's attacking again. Never really was that significant. Like, you put up a tower and a little bit of moat. I probably, honestly, if I did 3 towers, probably wouldn't even need a moat. But I just like the security of knowing that they actually can't get past the moat. Would it be more sporting? Maybe that's what I should do. I know just putting up single towers around the place is actually a pretty viable tactic, especially against the AI. But now we're going to be building some swords. And the reason behind this is because I just like swordsmen. Swordsmen are one of those things, like, here's the thing. these older Stronghold games, they don't make it necessarily easy to recruit units. So I prefer to recruit the highest quality units, so I have to recruit the fewest number of them possible. So if I go for swordsmen, I know they're going to be sticking around a lot longer than recruiting slaves, which means a lot fewer clicks, right? A lot fewer left clicks while recruiting them. And I can focus on hopefully more important things. But I found most of the time, like I was playing this match, I was able to keep quite busy with it. And that's one of those things, like I really am not sure how to better optimize my playstyle, because I think I have a fairly decent number of clicks here per second. Or how did they do that? They measure it in clicks per minute. I'm not a big follower of real-time strategy competitive scenes because I'm just a single player type of person. But apparently that's a big deal. Like in StarCraft, they'll actually have the counter. You can have it displayed on the screen, how many clicks per minute or something you're doing. And, well, I thought it was pretty decent here. I have no idea exactly the number of them, but I'm not really pausing. I'm not really hesitating much. I make some mistakes there. You see me undo 2 of the buildings that I placed down. You can only do that in the campaigns. You can't do that in skirmish. So it's one of those things it's a bad habit, I suppose, to get into using. I should just try to place the buildings correct the first time, because if I get into this habit of just undoing them after I put them down incorrectly, that means you're not as well equipped for skirmish maps. And that's not just skirmish against human players, it's also skirmish against other AI hordes as well. If you go into any of the skirmish trails, you're going to have to deal with that exact same problem. Which is interesting, because I really don't understand why they couldn't give you that grace period to undo a building. It might have something to do with... There might be an exploit for it, but I have no idea what it would be off the top of my head. But it's just nice to have that ability to, undo a building that you placed incorrectly, because that's really the only time I use it. I don't use it for any sort of cheesy strategy or anything. When I place down a building in a place that I didn't mean to, it's nice to have this grace period where you can actually just undo the building and then plop it back down without losing any resources, or without losing half of your resources, because that's what you get back if you delete it regularly. So I really don't understand why that's not included in the skirmish mode for the game. It's a bit baffling to me. Perhaps somebody else would know. So we got some started. We got some swordsmen started, and now I'm working on some catapults here. So the snake will be the first AI that we're going after, and it's 17 minutes in or so already. I didn't know that much time had actually elapsed. It hasn't felt like that much time, to be honest, but probably could have taken him out a little bit sooner. He is the snake. The interesting thing about the snake I've found is that he really does like to spam his archers. Like, he is almost like a human player in terms of how many archers he will have on top of his keep or on top of his towers. Unlike a lot of other AIs, like you see the wolf, he probably has 5-6 archers on top of that tower. The snake will actually pack his towers full. And here I'm deleting some of the woodcutters' huts because the problem being is that they ran out of trees in my local area, and now they're going across to where the wolf is, and the wolf's mangonel doesn't like that, so he has a mangonel mounted up in one of his square towers, and let's just say the stone reach of that mangonel is longer than the forecast of it. Like, you can set to target a certain area, and in this case the stones are flying further than that area. They're landing in my land and killing stuff, so are any of the woodcutters actually coming back with wood? Yeah, some of them are. But a lot of them are getting killed, and then they're also attracting the ire of the mangonel in the tower. So at the end of the day, I'd rather just not have all those stones flying in my general direction. That's really the thing I don't like. I don't like about mangonels is they're really annoying. They don't necessarily do much damage to structures, but just seeing them, throwing rocks at your economy and constantly killing peasants, it's a little bit hard to estimate the toll that they take on the economy overall, killing all those peasants that they do, but it's fairly noticeable, I think. Here I'm getting the catapults and swordsmen out, and we had a nice little incident with the gatehouse because, in these earlier Stronghold games, the gatehouses would just immediately close whenever an enemy AI was, well, an enemy. It doesn't have to be an AI, but when an enemy was close by, the gatehouses would automatically close, and your units can't go through them. Unlike in Stronghold Legends. In Stronghold Legends, your units, they really don't care whether or not the gate is open or closed because it does it automatically. Like if your unit wants to go outside, it opens the gate. If it wants to come back in, it opens the gate, but otherwise the gate remains closed. So Stronghold Legends had really good gatehouses, so we didn't have to mess with this other stuff. But here we are going to take a hole, knock a hole out of that wall. Of course, we actually have to get units up close to it, so that way we don't that way the snake can't just rebuild it immediately, which he will start doing. You'll notice he started doing it already, so I have to grab the catapults again and start it all over again. This was a rather interesting attack because I thought I had enough units here. The thing was, I didn't actually take a look at how many units the snake had, and he had actually been hoarding a whole bunch of units as he was planning to attack me in a relatively short amount of time. So I sent just under 50 swordsmen, which I thought was a fair amount, to take out the snake, because he doesn't actually have any strong units, he doesn't have any crossbows, he doesn't have any armored units, but then he has this ton of, look at all those spearmen that are just piling out of the keep, just pouring out like ants out of an anthill. It just seemed like it would never stop, and then the only reason I managed to get through is because my swordsmen sort of ducked off to the side, and that assault, I mean, just look at them, they're still coming out. But otherwise I wouldn't have won if I'd actually engaged all of those spearmen that were coming out of the keep, ultimately. But I managed to get to the keep, the top of the keep, and knocked it all down. Just like, killed the AI Lord. So that was a close one. It was a little bit closer than I like. And I'm somebody who likes overkill. I really like overkill. Like, I'll spend an extra 10 minutes making sure that I definitely don't lose and have to start over again or reload a save. That's just my philosophy. So we took out the snake, and now it's just down to the wolf. And the wolf has a relatively small castle in this map, which is nice. And now, this is funny. So I don't know, what is he called? He's like a man-at-arms, a pikeman, I suppose. And then there's that guy. But anyway, the guy who's your sort of advisor, he's like a pikeman, he says the wolf has left for Jerusalem, and then you'll continually hear about how the wolf is attacking you, which means he clearly didn't leave for Jerusalem, did he? I'm just being pedantic about it now. So I decided to go ahead and build some fire ballistas here. I know, like, you can really do a lot of damage with fire ballistas, and that's why I consider them to be like the most overpowered unit. I know, it's an interesting thing, like if you see any of the ridiculously top level player versus player matches, they don't use fire ballistas, they use horse archers. But when it comes to versus the AI, they just really aren't equipped at all to defend against fire ballistas. Let's face it, the AI does not defend very well to begin with, but they can hold up pretty good. Like the wolf, he lays a whole bunch of pitch all over his castle, so it's a little bit dangerous to run around it with swordsmen. But overall, it's like you can assault them relatively easily, providing you have plenty of resources. And that's a problem for me with resource light maps, is that at the end of the day, it's just taking you longer to do what you need to do. It's not like it's really that much harder, except in the beginning, because you understand that once you have your defenses up, it's just a slow grind until you actually manage to build up a large enough army. And that, of course, means you have to build up enough wealth to recruit that army. And when you have resource-poor maps, that means that it's just a slog. And so the AI needs to be able to take out players. It would be interesting to see how that would work. I don't even believe in Stronghold Crusader 2, the most recent game, that they were really capable of doing that. That's the interesting thing about Stronghold Crusader 2 as well, is I played that game a fair amount when it was in beta, and then I never really came back to it after that. It was like, oh, that's right, I had a thing that came up after that. It's like I was able to play it up until late 2014. I would say about November 2014. But after that, I had a bit of a personal issue, and then I really couldn't play it again. So I would say the next time I was able to play it was about half a year later. And by that time, a lot of the hype had died down around it. So it wasn't as... It's like I started focusing on other things instead. I think I was interested in focusing on actually doing YouTube. So sort of diverted my attention over to that from the beta testing and the Stronghold Kingdoms that I had been doing. Because, you know, you start getting bored of something after a while. It's just natural. It's, yeah, even what I do now, it can be boring at times, but it's one of those things that you look at what can you do that has the greatest impact in the world, and sometimes it's not all that much. I'm not really, or I am a little bit shy to say it, but sometimes you gotta set those expectations a little low. Realize that really all you had to contribute was, you know, yammering on about video games on YouTube. So that's that. But I mean, this is the slog part of the game. This is where I'm trying to build up the army that I'm going to attack with. And the biggest limitation is the rate at which your peasants come into the campfire and how much gold you have. So I'm constantly monitoring my stockpile, selling weapons, buying goods. I have to buy iron to actually make all these swords. All these swordsmen. They require swords and shields. Both of those items require iron, and there simply isn't enough iron on the map for me to make it myself. So I'm constantly having to monitor my levels and buy it. Once again, this is one of the nice improvements that have been made in the later iterations of Stronghold, is simply the ability to set up the auto market, where when you hit that mid to late game flow of the economy, I guess you could say, that you can just set it up and it'll automatically buy and automatically sell. So I wouldn't even have to worry about the iron or the stone. It's like, it's easy. When you play Stronghold Legends, you kind of forget about it, but then you're constantly reminded of it in games like this. Like, you hear the stockpile is full or the granary is full, right? And this is something that you simply don't have to deal with in the later games because they have the auto market. And the auto market, I suppose some hardcore people are against it, but I absolutely love it. I think it is a very good addition to the game because what exact value is there in simply having to go back to your economy all the time? It's not exactly fun. Like, sure, I understand. Like, the first third of the game, we focused mostly on building the economy. But then I'd like the next 2/3 of the game where I just sort of set the economy aside and let it do its own thing, right? It needs to be making me money so I can recruit more troops, but I don't want to have to think too much about the economy. And when you have to constantly monitor the stockpile and the granary and the armory, that it takes its toll. It constantly detracts from the fights and skirmishes that you're actually trying to have, and I would argue are actually the more interesting parts of the game, especially, well, it's the more interesting part of the mid and late game. The earlier parts of the game, I do like economy building. That's the interesting thing I've found, is like, I do like economy building, but it seems rather meaningless if it can't get destroyed. So I like to be able to play the farmer role, where you're actually just building up an economy and making a lot of gold from it, from building bakeries and selling bread and taxing your peasants. But at the same time, if there was no chance that I would get destroyed, which, to be fair, there isn't right now, but if there was never any threat, like if it was a solely economic game, I'm just not as compelled to play those games, even if they have this winning economic formula. So what am I focusing on here now? We have the game speed up to 90. I was a little bit surprised at how quickly I got it up there, because I'm a notoriously slow player. You probably wouldn't believe it, but like, when I was playing it by myself, before I had any real sort of understanding of how the game was played on a higher level, I would probably play about half of it on speed 20. It's like you were just sitting back and chilling, and just watching and waiting, I guess. There was a lot of that. And now I look back at it and see that missions that should have took me, 45 minutes, all of a sudden took me 3 hours to complete. And that was a huge contributing factor as to why that I probably only got about halfway through overall the skirmish campaigns. Or the skirmish trails. The campaigns, they're mini campaigns in Stronghold Crusader HD. But the trails themselves, there are 2 of them. And I got about half, maybe 50% of the way through one of them. Yeah, I think the first trail I got halfway through it, but then the second trail I only got about 33% of the way through it. And so it would actually be interesting to finish it this time. Like if I went ahead and played all of those missions in my own noob way and finished it off. Yeah, so what do we got up here to 122 population and now 130. So I was saying 140, maybe it was only 130, but to me that was a lot of population because I generally maybe just over 100, somewhere around there is where I usually keep it. So anything over that seems like if I go to 140, it seems like a lot because it's almost like 25% more, 25 to 33% more. 33 to 50% more. Percentages. How I just messed it. Like people have told me I messed up my percentages. So if I talk about percentages, you probably should not be listening to me because I'm just guaranteed to mess that up. It's one of those more abstract problems that's just difficult for me to sort of visualize in my head. Because I do better with literal things, I guess, than the more abstract stuff. Or not literal, concrete. An abstract concept could be literal without being concrete, couldn't it?
We stand ready. Needed, sire.
Yeah. Weapons needed. So, what else can we talk about? We're getting close to being done. Well, not close. But I've kind of run out of topics. It's one of the problems with these longer matches. Like I can ramble on for 30 minutes and then I start running out of things to say. And the worst part is going to be if you watch multiple episodes of mine, it's going to start sounding really repetitive because at the end of the day, there are only so many things I can talk about. So I'll probably retread old ground several times, and to me especially that feels repetitive. Like to the audience who probably don't hear me repeat a lot of stuff again and again because you don't watch a lot of what I do, it wouldn't sound repetitive then, but for me, because I'm the one who has to sit here and do it all the time, and then like every single episode I record I end up mentioning the same sort of concepts again and again. And I start wondering, am I being way too repetitive with this stuff? Is it actually interesting to talk about these concepts again, these unique aspects to the game, like mentioning the fact that you can stick a woodcutter's hut in front of an enemy gatehouse to kill off the potential that enemy AI has. Like everybody sort of knows this exploit, so should I bother talking about it anymore? It's one of those decisions you have to make as a creator, I guess. I don't know if I'm creating a lot. Like, what would be the definition of the most creative person? Because there is a lot of stuff that is sort of based on other stuff. Like, let's say we have a painter and they paint a picture of an apple. Were they really being that creative? I suppose the most creative people are the most abstract artists, which also, I don't know, incites a fair amount of controversy as to whether or not what their scribbles are actually are art. But at the end of the day, there's a lot less influence from the real world then, and a lot more abstract creativity maybe. But there's just like, here I'm going to start narrating what I'm doing. I'm clicking on a swordsman to recruit 20 more swordsmen. The long haul, let's talk about the overarching plan here. I was going to approach from, I guess this is the west. I would call it the west given the current screen orientation. So since I very seldom rotate the screen, we're going to consider the top of the screen north, the bottom south, the left west, and the right east. So the wolf is to the west, and in the hints for this mission, they recommend attacking from the bluffs. So launch your attack from this bluff because it will be a height advantage. Well, what good does a height advantage do me unless I have a lot of ranged units? I mean, how am I ever going to use ranged units to take out the wolf's castle? It's just simply unrealistic, I think. So instead, I went for this approach where we're going to be attacking from two sides, the west and the north. I also have to add this tower here, a great tower, because there were some Arabian bowmen from the wolf taking pot shots at my farmers, especially the farmer on the hops farm that's right behind that great tower. So I thought I would put an end to that. I was hoping I wouldn't have to put a tower there, but it turns out the AI, as I've mentioned before, is great at like micro harassments for your economy. They're very good at just picking away, just one extra arrow. They're like the straw that breaks the camel's back. Like you're fine dealing with everything else, but then there's just that one archer who continues to kill your one critical farmer who's bringing home the wheat, and then all of a sudden your entire economy collapses because that was actually a very crucial part of it. That's not what happened here, but I'm just saying it really does bother me that the AI can perform this sniping thing. It's an interesting thing, right? Because they can't perform an attack that can kill me, but they can annoy me, I guess you could say. My jester got killed there. He went out to entertain my armies, and it turns out that the enemy is more than happy to kill a jester. And that's another funny thing. Like if you play with peacetime on, you can have the jester run over to an area that has an enemy, let's say ox in it. So in other words, like an ox tether, because this happens rather frequently, where there'll be a central place with a whole bunch of quarries in them, right? And then there'll be the ox tethers there. So your jester will run over there to entertain the quarry workers, and they'll start beating on enemy oxen. And since you're currently at peace, you know, there's like a 10-minute no skirmish peacetime, whatever you want to call it. They can basically kill your oxen with no repercussions, because you can't control any sort of unit to go over there and kill that stupid jester. So he'll continue to wail away on your oxen until it's dead. Not a big deal, but it's one of those funny things.
A message from the wolf.
Is there no one who will rid me of your irritating presence?
And I will admit, before I actually launched this attack, I did save the game, because this is one of those things where you spent an hour, well, it was 40 minutes maybe? It was about 40 minutes playing up to this point. I'd already done it once before, and it failed because I forgot to actually... Or I didn't forget to do anything. I accidentally clicked on my task manager window and dragged it into the game, which minimized Stronghold Crusader to the taskbar, while at the same time my screen capture program was trying to record it. And that just caused all sorts of mayhem and resulted in me losing my recording and the game, the progress that I had made. So didn't want to have to run through it again if I accidentally failed this attack. It can happen. It's like, in general, I think I have a large enough force here, but let's say I made one mistake, forgot to speed the game, slow the game down at a certain point. Like even now, I'm making a mistake here of drawing the trebuchet attacks with my catapults. My catapults, I would much rather have the not the trebuchets, the mangonels, the wolf's mangonels firing at my swordsmen rather than my catapults, because my catapults need to actually take the towers down. And this is, you know, the best way I found to deal with tower-mounted mangonels, because they can really be annoying. You try to approach them and you just see this very expensive force getting whittled down immediately. So generally just like take 10 or more catapults in a group and focus their fire on that tower and just smash it right down like that. You know, it only takes a couple of seconds for it to happen then. And that was another thing that I had to learn a little bit the hard way, because when you play the sort of the missions, the story missions for a lot of these for Stronghold, they will very seldom give you the or an overkill of siege units. So I sort of got used to only having, I can only attack the wolf with 3 trebuchets. You know, I had this sort of idea with it. But no, you can actually just ridiculously spam siege equipment. Not saying you should be able to, but that's the most effective way. At the end of the day, you just rip towers right out, and that's probably the AI's biggest weakness. They just don't have enough siege units. Because what I'm doing here is I'm dealing some massive damage to its castle that would otherwise be relatively defensive. Like if an AI attacked the wolf's castle, they're not going to win against it most likely. It's going to have to be a war of attrition at that point. But yeah, tearing the whole thing down. It's not a big castle. It's not a glorious castle to tear down, but I did my best, I guess you could say. My fire ballistas are also helping remove archers from the walls, so it's one thing I found them useful for. Like, I didn't want to make it where I just attacked only with fire ballistas or something ridiculous like that, because I probably could have. But I kind of like using them to complement other forces as well. So instead of having crossbowmen along, for example, I have fire ballistas along. And the nice thing about fire ballistas, they don't get destroyed as quickly as crossbowmen do. They have a little bit more resistance, providing, you know, a bunch of knights don't ride into the middle of them and destroy them all. But I sort of credit the fire ballistas for the reason that maybe my troops didn't get burned here. I really expected them to, but maybe it's just because I hardly moved any in. In the past, that's the interesting thing. Like in the other episode where I ended up losing the progress that I had, I actually lost probably about 33% of my units, my troops here. Is that about the same number? I lost about 33% of them to fire. There was a lot of pitch in this area, and he set it on fire. But then here I was, trying to do the same thing. I was just being a little bit cautious about it, and he never did anything. Never set anything on fire. There are fire arrows coming from the keep, so it's not like he couldn't. It was what he thought there wasn't enough swordsmen that would actually threaten him. I don't know. So I ended up just sending those swordsmen on into the keep. Yeah. I think this is my favorite tactic though at the moment. Against the AI. I think against players too it is fairly effective. Having the ton of catapults, like that's the best way to sort of bust down a castle. Like you could do stuff like get siege towers, but mass spam catapults at the end of the day is the best. So that's victory. So thank you very much for watching, I guess, as always. For those people who are a little bit disappointed that I wasn't doing longer form Stronghold content, this should appease you. But otherwise, I hope to see you next time.